Hey there, this is Philip from Beyond the Tabletop. In this video I'm talking about the Untitled Pattern Hellhound and how I created the Devil Dog and Bane Wolf weapon variants. So as most of you are probably aware, the Games Workshop plastic version of the Hellhound also comes in two different flavours. It comes with the Bane Wolf which has a Kem Cannon, and the Devil Dog which comes with a very large Melta cannon. As you can see here, I've got the Forgeworld Pattern Hellhound. The kit doesn't come with any other turret variant, so you can't play it as the Devil Dog or the Bane Wolf. So I wanted to make my own up. So here is the turret up close. You'll notice I've magnetised this turret. So I've used a 3mm magnet in the weapon and a stack of 3mm magnets at the back. Now, by using a stack of magnets in the turret, that means I can sort of save on magnets while increasing the strength, because the stack is within here and I only ever need to use one magnet for each weapon, rather than say 3. This one is the Devil Dog with its iconic Melta cannon. I'll go into a bit more detail later on in terms of how I've created this. And then I have the other one, which is the Bane Wolf's Chem Cannon. So here are the original masters that I had created to then cast up to use as my variants. As you can see, both the weapon tips are from the original Games Workshop plastic kits. After quite a few months of searching, I've actually managed to find someone who had some spare, but they only had one set. So this would mean I couldn't run 2 Bane Wolves or 2 Devil Dogs at the same time. So this was a bit of a problem. This is why I went down the route of casting up my own copies. So with the plastic tips, I still needed a way of successfully attaching this to the main turret. Now, the only logical solution I could come up with is using the same base that the original turret had, because this profile fits in perfectly. Now, I could have potentially scratch built one out of plasticard, which would have been a bit time consuming to try and get the size exactly right. Now, normally I would try and source this second hand, but it was absolutely impossible. And I could go around and buy another Hellhound. That's a lot of money to invest just for what is essentially a very tiny part. So what I decided to do was do a cast of this, so I could then have a solid base to work from. For something of this size, I decided to create a silicone mold and create some resin casts. So here is the silicone mold that I had created. So if I open it up, you can see the flamer shape in there. So I finally managed to create a few copies of this. None of them were very well or to particularly high quality. There was often quite a lot of air bubbles, especially down at this end. But I finally managed to get 2 that I could butcher to be my base units. As you can see here, there's quite a lot of green stuffing that was needed, especially just here to fix these air bubbles. I think here the issue was the silicone mold had some air bubbles in because the pore wasn't very good. So if you imagine this was the cast, you could see I just had to cut it here to mount the plastic tip on, and then actually using a spare bit of this tubing here, I managed to bend it around to create this little join here, just so that this circular end had some detail joining it to the turret. I then decided to carry on this piping effect here on the plastic and replicate it in the resin using some brass rod. It's slightly small. I didn't have the exact size to match up, but I think it works pretty well. To stop the rod going straight into the plastic and to help join the 2 parts together, I decided to green stuff a lip going all the way around. And then I green stuffed this lip on the right hand side just to tidy it up and to hide some of the joins with the brass rod and the resin. So lastly, I had this ribbed cabling wrapped around, going all the way around to the back and going into the sort of turret, which would be back here. This is created from guitar wire. Guitar wire is a really good hobby material to use to get that kind of ribbed effect. The only other way you can easily do it is using some green stuff and some press molds. This was probably the hardest part of the build, trying to get the wire bent around correctly and to wrap the gun, and then also just trying to get it glued in place. It took a few attempts and a bit of trial and error, but it finally got there and I think it looks really good. And again, I've just green stuffed a lot of the air bubbles that were caused from the casting process, just to try and tidy it up and smooth it out, which is why there's quite a bit of green stuff just dotted around, especially in this ridged detail just here along the bottom, because I was getting a lot of air bubbles trapped in my casts. So that's the Melta cannon. Next up is the Chem Cannon. So here is the Bane Wolf Chem Cannon. Again, I've got the plastic tip and the core base, which is made from resin. You can see how the base mirrors the original part, with the bottom barrel being cut just here, and then the top barrel being cut just here, which gave me enough of a mounting for the Chem Cannon to sit just inside that ledge. And this section here, which just joins that bottom section to the tip of the barrel, is just this end part here. On this version you can see a small indentation just here. That was a happy accident because there was an air bubble trapped in the resin, which caused the rest of the cabling to be malformed, and it just gave you a little end like that. So that worked quite well. So to try and make the plastic section fit in with the resin part a little bit better, what I've done is I've just followed on this cabling detail here. So it goes along from the plastic, and then I've added it in again with some guitar wire. Now this is thinner guitar wire than the previous one, and it's probably slightly too small in comparison to the plastic cabling, but I think it works okay. Because the cabling is a lot thinner, it's actually a lot easier to bend and create right angles with it. So on this one I could sort of bend it around at two very close right angles to go into this little box here, where there was nothing on this side. So instead I just carried the cabling all the way along down to the back, which will then eventually be hidden by the turret section just here. I tried to smooth off this section here as much as possible, because this barrel, the plastic bit between the cabling, is actually round, whereas the resin section is quite flat. So I just had to try and create a smooth transition for both of those. And again, there's a lot of green stuffing to cover up parts of the miscast and air bubbles, again especially on this ridge along the bottom, so that was quite time consuming to achieve. Now here are my two finished guns. Now if I just had one Hellhound, this would be fine and I could stop the project here. I could magnetise these guys up and add them to the turret and then get painting. But the problem I have is that I've actually got two Hellhounds, and therefore I need a duplicate set of these. Now if I had some more plastic ends, I could potentially just go about recreating these all over again, which would be a bit time consuming and not ideal, but it definitely is an option. That leaves me really with just one option. The route I went down was casting these up in a silicone mold, which will allow me to make some resin copies. So these are my master molds. To prep them for the mold, you've got to really just make sure there's no real overhangs and deep cuts. The tips would normally go quite a lot deeper in the plastic, so I've just filled those with green stuff, so there's only a very small overhang. If it was to go in any further, the silicone would likely catch and break when trying to take these out of the mold. So I ended up mounting these onto a resin block, which I could then cast up in one single mold. So here you can see the silicone mold that I have created. It's sort of made from one block of silicone that you then cut open about 90% of the way down, which allows you just to open it up. Now you can see I've got both guns side by side, and I just mounted it on a block with a funnel leading to the two guns. You can also very slightly see these lines just coming off here. These are the wires that I'd created for air vents, just to help the air escape from the casting process. Now if I show you one of my first molds, you can see the casting gate, which is where I poured in the resin, and then the two guns. If you look up close, there's quite a few little air bubbles just dotted around. This bit is completely miscast, which is why I didn't use this one. You can see there's quite a few air bubbles just at this bottom section. Now that's because that bottom section is actually the top. If I bring the silicone mold back, you can see it goes this way up and the resin pours in from the top. The air will try and escape upwards, but more often than not will get trapped by this overhang, which is why I had decided to angle the guns to try and minimise any overhang so that air can sort of travel outwards, but I still had these air vents at sort of key overhang places to try and allow the air to escape. Doesn't always work and is very hit and miss, which just means it took quite a lot of attempts to try and get a couple of copies made. Now you can see I finally got my 2 sets of guns cast up. I actually got a couple of decent ones after sort of a lot of trial and error. The colour difference between them is just due to the amount of black dye that I used in each resin batch, and it was just a bit inconsistent. So I'll just give you a close-up look. You can still see I had to do quite a fair amount of green stuffing just to still fix air bubbles and sort of miscast elements. And these were still the best versions that I had managed to come up with. So again, on this version, a pretty good cast overall, but this bit at the bottom still causing me a lot of grief from both versions of the cast. And these two came out slightly better than the previous version and needed some green stuffing, but probably not as much. And on the back, I just managed to drill out a hole to fit the 3mm magnets in. As you can see, here is the original Hellhound turret. Snaps in nice and easily. Then I've got the Bane Wolf, angled ever so slightly upwards, which is just due to the angle of this back. But I think that's fine because most things that the Melta cannon is going to be shooting at is going to be quite large, monstrous creatures and big tanks, so I think that's in keeping. And then lastly, we've got the Bane Wolf's Kem Cannon. Now I'm really pleased with how these turrets turned out. So there you have it, a completed Forgeworld Gruyere pattern Hellhound, now with all the possible weapon options, allowing it to be turned into a Bane Wolf or Devil Dog, along with swapping out the Heavy Bolter for the Heavy Flamer. I'm really happy with how this project has gone. I'm really happy with the 2 designs I've come up with for the turrets. They still have that kind of core 40k look to them, but I've managed to take my own unique spin on it. This project has taken quite a while to come to fruition because I've had to learn a lot of new techniques, such as actually learning how to make silicone molds and cast up my own resin models. Now, it goes without saying that recasting somebody else's property when it's for commercial gain is a bad thing. However, this is purely for personal use. Resin casting isn't easy to do, it's also not very cheap. So creating these 2 guns has not been very cost effective whatsoever. So by all means, if you can, try and get the plastic barrel ends and then potentially just scratch building the rest out of plasticard. That would be a much quicker and easier conversion. Now, I don't expect anyone to follow in my footsteps. It was quite a difficult project, but I just wanted to show you the techniques and my mindset behind the creation process. Hopefully this still gives you some ideas that will be of use to you. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see how these guys will look once they're painted, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, because I will be doing a painting video on this down the line. That's all for now. Until the next time, take care.